All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. Casey, how's it going?
Good. Lots of good chats. People getting ready for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So, kind of
Yeah.
some strategy questions and helping people walk through different scenarios on different listings. So, yeah, definitely
Nice.
get to that time of the year where you want to make sure you're fully set up. Maybe some listings have some specific scenarios you want to take into account. So, yeah, it's been fun to kind of get a little bit more creative and in the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of like live webinar calls with partners and different private groups and basically talking about this. How do you do things in Q4? Which is kind of fun for me because I think the advice and approach we have this year is vastly different than previous years because of Maven and Hyperdrive. That's what's cool about what we do is like we can kind of change the paradigm with technology, which is really fun. And as everybody's joining, again, live office hours, no format here. Just dump us questions. We're happy to deep dive into any areas you guys want to go into, whether that's repricing Aura as a product, selling in general, Q4 stuff, whatever you guys want to dive deep into, we can. I have noticed an interesting kind of shift in AI as of late. I don't know if it's a blip. I don't know, but it's become more. I don't know the right term to use. People seem more on edge now. Like the people that are in it, right? Not just like the average, like my grandparents who are always afraid of AI. Like that's not going to change. Although they're actually starting to get kind of excited as I talk to them about it. But yeah, there's a little bit more like things are happening. There's a little bit more pause, a little bit more hesitation, which to me signals we're much closer to AGI than we think we are. Apparently, I just learned this. GPT-4 had finished training before ChatGPT got released. And we're talking, I don't know the exact deadline or timeline between these two things, but we're talking like at least 6 months.
Yeah.
So, there's this kind of catchy phrase, which is AGI achieved internally. It's more of like a kind of tongue-in-cheek joke, like, oh, they got more than they're saying. But actually, people are starting to think maybe, wait, hold on. Like, there's enough chatter, enough rumor here that, and enough founders in the space that are writing in a way that's so very different. Like, they're really thinking about post-AGI world. And like, not just like, oh, this will be fun and like hyping it up. No, like deeply thinking about this. And you're seeing a lot of high level people in these foundation model companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, that are leaving. And they're like, I'm just going to go soul searching for like 6 months. And, some of them are starting other companies, certainly, but it's just an interesting trend that it's like, the theory is that they have achieved it internally. And a lot of these people are like, I have nothing left to do. We're done. We did it. And I'm going to go just be a human for a while. Like I got enough money. Yeah. They're just like, I'm going to hang out until we, as a company, roll out AGI and the world changes.
And just for context, for those of people who may be watching, what does like the G stand for in AGI?
Yeah. So AI, very broad term. You got a lot of things under that umbrella. I had somebody yesterday in a conversation ask, hey, what large language model is Maven using? We don't use generative AI. It's a very different area of artificial intelligence. When you're talking like levels of AI, the big, OpenAI has the 5 levels. Level 1, and this is just how they're trying to measure where we're at conceptually. So like level 1 is chatbots. We've had that. Level 2 is human reasoning. We just hit that with O1 preview, which is actually a massive deal. It unlocks a lot of possibilities and capabilities. Level 3 is agents. So these are things where, like right now, when you're dealing with AI, you're really asynchronously saying, here's a request, it responds back, and you go back and forth, and you ping pong back and forth. Agents are very different, where you say, here's kind of the end goal that I want you to do. Take as long as you need to solve it. And it could work on it for a week and come back and be like, here you go. Right? It might ask you more questions, be like, hey, I'm kind of stuck on this. Can you help me with that? Can you give me this data? Blah, 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 blah. The 4th one is innovators. So this is mainly impactful for things like science, right? Like they're innovating, finding new ideas, like unlocking new latent potential. Like, that's a massive deal, though. Level 5 is whole organizations. So there's a period in time where you have an entire company where the whole company, with minor exceptions, is AI. Like you have an AI CFO, an AI CEO. And this harkens back to an old thing, which was the ideal factory is staffed with one human and a dog. The human's there to fix anything that happens, and the dog is there to make sure that the human doesn't mess anything up. And it's an interesting kind of allegory, but we're like the organization level basically illustrates that. So AGI is hard. There's a lot of different definitions of what it means. A lot of people will say once it can do every possible thing to, against the average human, we've reached it. Now, and this is an interesting trend, the benchmark keeps changing. The Turing test was the biggest measure of artificial intelligence for the longest time. Alan Turing created what we know as computers. That did not exist. If you watch the movie Enigma with Benedict Cumberbatch, that is Alan Turing. So he created the Turing test, which was basically if I'm having a conversation with something and I can't see what it is, if I think it's human and it's actually artificial intelligence, it basically has passed the Turing test. Well, we kind of blew past that and everybody just didn't mention it. We just did it and people were like, oh, okay, whatever. And fun fact, my email has passed the Turing test because I use Howie.ai for scheduling. And 2 people recently when we jumped in the call, were like, hey, where'd you find this Howie guy? Super fast. Awesome. I'm like, that's AI. They thought it was a human. That's the Turing test pass in my personal inbox. Crazy. So the other version of kind of defining AGI, that means AGI is artificial general intelligence. So you have to distinguish between narrow, so it can do one thing really, really well, or it can do a lot of things really, really well. That's the AGI. Some people will say basically once the system can outperform a PhD level in every subject, we've technically reached AGI. In a way, it's a measure of intelligence, although there's some issues with measuring AGI based on pure IQ, because EQ matters a lot more than we like to realize in the world, at least in the human world. And so now we've created a new thing called ASI, artificial super intelligence. So again, we're ratcheting up, which is the crazy part, right? AGI was, first it was the Turing test, then it was AGI's the massive goal to hit. And now we're like, actually, there's another goal to hit. And I think this will continue. But the theory is that once we reach true AGI, and it's a rational assumption to say that this will happen inside of the company building it before it gets released. And there's already precedents for these types of companies to sit on cutting edge models a little bit longer because they're kind of allowing the general populace to get used to these things. Because if you came out with AGI tomorrow, the whole world would be like, what the hell is this? Like, we don't even know how to use it. So like, in a way, they're stair-stepping us up into that world. But in theory, it could already exist and they're going to wait 2 years to release it. And that could be, a good reason to do so is like the world's just not ready. Like we need time. Sure. But what's interesting is those 5 levels I walked through, the speed at which we're going from level 1 to 2 to 3 is compressing each time. So it took a lot of time to get to level 1, less time to get to level 2, and in theory, far less time to get to level 3. And level 3 is where people get really excited because these agents, this unlocks a seemingly pseudo AGI. Like now I can say, here's a bunch of information, go do the thing. This unlocks AI-based employees where it's not just a chat bot. It's not just, referencing information. It's like actually making decisions, all kinds of cool stuff. So it's a massive leverage. And again, level 4, that innovator, the average person is not going to get enough value from that directly, but everybody can get the value from an agent, especially if it's generally, built. So Yeah, it's an interesting thing. There's a lot of excitement and optimism, and just as of lately, there's been not less optimism, but more kind of pausing and reflecting and just like, let's think about what that looks like and what's going to break and blah, blah, blah. So it's being taken more seriously now. It's less about this pie in the sky. Let's work towards this moonshot, and more the moonshot is less of a moonshot than we think it is. And we could get there faster than we think it is. So Ray Kurzweil, awesome guy, inventor, heads up Google, in like their innovation department. He has made predictions over the course of his life, and his hit rate's like 86% Like, it's pretty good, like consistent. He has pegged AGI in 2029. 2029. What's interesting is he's even like, that's very conservative, by the way. So, a lot of people like 2026 actually. So who knows? It's very, very up in the air, but yeah, it's just, there's an interesting kind of, you can feel it if you're in that world and you're on Twitter in those circles, you're starting to feel like, okay, the narrative is shifting a little bit, which to me is exciting. It means we're asking larger questions, and I think that's a good thing, but I think it is kind of freaking a lot of people out because there's this big unknown of what do we do when we do have AGI.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Not quite at the finish line, but kind of getting close to it and then turning around and being like, did we miss anything? Is there anything?
Like, now we can see it. You know what I mean? Right. It's like you rounded the corner. You're like, there it is. We still got a ways to go, but like, oh my gosh, it's there. Like, what does this mean? So it's interesting. See, we have a question here though. Question regarding Maven, maybe a repeated question. Are you considering adding multiple AI Mavens with specific focus options for strategy? For example, one tailored for new private label listings to determine the optimal price and sales volume, or another for listings with low competition. I understand Maven is automated, but I'm curious if it actively optimizes for listings where data may be limited. So great question. It can optimize with limited data. It just takes a little bit longer. So when you're thinking, you basically have like amount of data and time. The more data there is, the shorter amount of time it takes to be able to optimize. So as the data available goes down, time goes up. We have talked a lot about this internally, which is having, maybe it's still Maven, but you can kind of direct it, right? Maybe there's a spectrum of aggressiveness. Base Maven right now is right smack dab in the middle of that spectrum, which is balancing sales velocity and profitability. But because the spectrum exists, you could imagine like a slider that's like, hey, I want to prioritize velocity over everything, or I want to prioritize profit margin over velocity, and anywhere in between there. So this is something we're like conceptually playing with, definitely, but I keep coming back to like, do we have different variations of Maven that are preset, or do we allow a few more controls to direct Maven and it's still just Maven, but with a little bit more direction by the end user?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting talking to people in chat asking for like more customizations on AI and trying to like reframe the perspective that the more guardrails you put on AI, it becomes less AI and it becomes more like a rules-based strategy. So right now we do have obviously our rules-based strategies that have more customizable settings if you want to be really specific, whether it's like ignoring FBA sellers, ignoring FBM sellers, ignoring Amazon back-ordered sellers. So there is so much customization available in rules-based. And that's something that I've been thinking about as well, where if we were to add additional settings into Maven, what would those look like? To the point where they're not just a rules-based strategy. And it is obviously a balance, like having, like there's a lot of companies out there that pride themselves in having AI, but there's a lot of settings that you customize. So it's less AI than the way they present it. But yeah, to answer kind of like the last part of that, Maven does definitely optimize for listings where data is limited. It just takes a little bit longer, like you said, Dylan. I always recommend people having Maven on a listing for like 5 to 7 days, just to make sure that if there is less data available, whether that's less price updates, lower demand in terms of sales, or less competition overall. That should give it enough time to kind of optimize. And then once you hit that 5 to 7 day mark and you're not quite seeing what you're looking for, that's where I'd consider maybe shifting over to a more specific rules-based approach.
Yeah, and there's this kind of law of diminishing returns when you're talking AI and control. If you have no limitations placed on the AI, pure chaos, like performance can be horrible. Right. So you want enough to direct it. But if you start to add, there gets to a point basically where you add too much control and limitation that it starts to hinder the performance. Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to be very cognizant of, does it make sense to do that? Sometimes it does, certainly. But that comes down to a lot of testing and experimentation, mm-hmm. because I've done this long enough to know that some things that should just work don't, and things that shouldn't work do. It's just so counterintuitive that you basically have to run the experiment and like actually see the real data to right. know like, okay, this actually works. You know, because one thing I would love to do is add like an age of inventory functionality to Maven, right? Where you say, mm-hmm. okay, cool, do your regular thing, but once the age of inventory on average is over 30 days, I want you to become more aggressive. Yeah. And you would say 30, 45, 60 to just be like an input field as an example. I love that idea, but we haven't tested it yet. So it's hard for me to say like, oh, that would totally work. It's like, it's a great idea. Right. I don't know yet. Maybe.
Right. And it's kind of similar to how we found that with a wider min and max range, Maven's more effective, like right. kind of giving it more runway to operate in. And as you add in more guardrails in this example, a stricter min and max range, it's not going to be as effective because it's going to determine, hey, the optimal price is above your max, so we're just going to stay at your max. And just giving it that wider range to test those different price points is going to help it become more intelligent more quickly, and then therefore make better decisions faster.
Yeah. And again, that came through experimentation, because I remember I was telling somebody yesterday that was joining with us, a pretty large seller. I was like, I wanted personally to have the confidence before we release Maven to the wild that it wouldn't tank things, because that was the big preconceived notion, like AI tanks things because another company built it very much incorrectly. And so I said, okay, cool. Our internal account, we can do some crazy stuff with it. If it tanks it, whatever. So put everything on Maven, put everything at 0% ROI minimum, and it was totally fine. No tanking. I was like, oh, okay, cool. We're good. Like, but again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's funny, like you do certain things where you can almost like feel that it should work because you understand how the system works. And you're like, in this case, I bet you it's going to. But you still need to run the experiment to have the confidence to say that that is true. Because when we had a large seller move literally everything over to Maven overnight and his performance went down, we're like, okay, well, what's happening? And we're like, you know what? I bet you it's this. And we just tested it. And sure enough, that's what worked. And that's how we learned, okay, cool. Like having a lower min doesn't necessarily hurt things. In fact, it can actually increase performance. So when we're talking about troubleshooting performance, especially using Maven, we tend to say the first thing you want to do is look at how you're setting your mins. Because if you're setting it at 30% ROI, go ahead and drop that down to 15% ROI and see if that boosts performance. That doesn't mean your prices are going down. It just means Maven has more range, more flexibility to run its strategy and do what it needs to do. Sure enough, most of the time, that fix alone solves it. And then you can take that a step further and say, okay, well, I'm going to drop everything to 0% and just let the market dictate it. And we're going to do our best here. And this kind of gets into the spectrum of user. You know, some sellers really want fine grain control. They want to be in there manipulating things. And, you know, there's tools where you can literally code your own repricing tool. The average person is not going to do that, like, because you're going to miss out on so much. But on the other end, you have people who want to set it up in the most simplistic way because it's easier to manage. And we're starting to find that in doing that route with Maven particularly, you're not really trading much. Like you can trade some velocity, certainly. And I don't think everybody should just have one version of Maven with a minimum ROI of 0%. That's not what I'm saying. But there are sellers who do that. And they're like, I'm happy as a bug. I'm good here. So you kind of have to figure out like kind of where you're at. I think we're moving away from you needing to be so in the weeds with the settings controls and all that stuff. I think we're moving past that, which is good because it frees up more of your time to go source, which that's where you make your money. Let's see here. Another concern is that Maven doesn't seem to recognize the higher profitability at price points like $9.99 or $14.99, especially when Hyperdrive is on. It often suggests prices like $15, $24, etc., where my profitability is actually lower. So that should not be happening because we actually have reduced profit ranges built in. What I would say is take that SKU, whatever SKU you're talking about, send that to live chat. Finn's in there right now. Let's take a deeper look on it. There could be a bug, but that should not be happening.
Yeah, there could be a bug, and there could also be an updated reduced profit range that, like, when Amazon makes changes to those profit ranges, they don't necessarily send us that data. So then there's a little manually.
They definitely
tweaking.
don't send us that data.
Right. So then there's a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done on our end to just make sure that range is respected. So yeah, definitely send that SKU via the chat function there.
See, only with Hyperdrive on, that's kind of an interesting. I wonder if there's an edge case there. Those two things should not correlate. But I'm not the software engineer. I'm just kind of thinking through like how I know it works. That should not be the case. But interesting correlation. So just send that context over as well to Finn in live chat, and we'll take a deep dive and see if there's a bug. But yeah, like Casey's saying, they'll make changes. Just don't tell us. You know, it's funny with the whole bundling, the branded bundle stuff. They're like, oh, it goes into effect, you know, a little bit into the future. We're giving you a heads up. And somebody was in the Seller forums in a response was like, dude, I got literally suspended for this 3 months ago. Like, this is not new. Like, you're just now telling us about it, and it's going to happen well into the future. But here we are. People are already getting suspended for it. So, you know, can't tell you why that occurs. Comms are difficult in a very large company. But there are times where we've caught things that nobody knew about, and they just changed the API. And we're like, oh, glad we discovered that. Yeah. And, you know, you submit a ticket with Amazon on the GitHub and hope somebody responds back, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we changed that. Any notification? No. Yeah. Cool, man.
There's been multiple times when me and our engineering team were looking at different fees for different products, and there was like a new fee, and we went into Amazon's calculator to see how they were calculating that fee, and it literally said $125 plus $1 equals $3.50. And we're like, that's not right. That's not how math works, unfortunately. Yeah, even
the
their
math
own
doesn't always math.
Yeah, even their own calculators don't always have the fees fully updated. So
yeah,
it's always interesting.
I was joking with somebody via email, one of our users, because he's like, oh, do you miss being a seller dealing with all these crazy things with Amazon? I was like, not really, but I was like, but funny enough, we deal with similar things just differently, you know. So like, we still, as a developer, I thought we wouldn't have any of these kind of issues, and we do. We just have different kinds of issues that we have to deal with, and it's fun. So let's see here. Related to general selling, new dashboard, the beta showing useful data in Seller Central. Let me know what the question is there. See if I can copy this guy. Like how you can't copy anything. I just realized we can't copy things in
the comments. Yeah, I realized that a few weeks ago.
Let me just type this in. It's on Sell Business. So Vehi, send us a little bit more details on this guy here.
I'd be curious if you're looking at any specific data that's been added that is actionable or helpful for you.
Yeah, like what about it?
Yeah, maybe help some other folks look at their data a little bit more intelligently leading into the next few weeks here.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was looking at the Q4 dashboard in our account. I created a video for Twitter a few days ago. I was like, man, we're already a third of the way through. Oh my gosh. It's absolutely crazy. It shows charts and stuff, just sharing. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, well, let's take a deeper dive on that.
Yeah. Sometimes it is nice to get those figures visualized with actual visual representation as opposed to just different figures where you're
rows of data.
Yeah.
That's the hard part, man. It's like, oh, well, the data's there. It's like, yeah, but like it's basically a database view, and I'm not a software engineer.
What does it mean?
Yeah, to manipulate it and get it into a usable, actionable form is a different problem. So that's fun. But good to see that they're shipping some new stuff there. Definitely good to see that. We did get approved for the Walmart API. So we have a call on Friday to start kicking off actual access. So we got approved for it. We still have to get access. So we got an awesome call scheduled this Friday to kind of get the ball rolling there. It seems like they're a little bit more hands-on with their developers. It's early days, makes a lot of sense. They're going to want to have conversations, learn what we want, things of that nature. But kind of excited to get in there, man. It's so weird to think of Walmart as a tech company. And every time I'm like, Walmart? Like, all right, it feels wrong. I don't know, but I'm from the South. So Wally World, where, it's cheap retailer, but it is really cool to see them ratchet things up, take it seriously. And it seems like they're investing quite a lot into the marketplace. So very interesting. What are you doing for Halloween? You dressing up?
I'm not a big dress up guy. I do have a default costume every year in case I have friends or people that want to go to a costume party. I do have a Chewbacca onesie that works out
very cool.
Well. So I just rock that. I have Chewbacca slippers that match. So I got the whole kit and caboodle whenever we go to parties there. It gets a little hot, but it just zips down the front. So you just wear a t-shirt underneath. You're good to go.
Yeah. Nice.
So I don't have any plans as of yet. Might head up to New Hampshire to see my family and little nephew over the weekend, but
nice.
He might get a kick out of the costume. So we'll see.
For sure.
See how that goes down. Yeah.
Yeah. My stepson, he decided he wanted Ghostbusters, which came out of nowhere because I don't think he's ever watched Ghostbusters with me. So we're all going to be Ghostbusters. I tried to be the Marshmallow Man. They didn't have my size. I was so upset. We needed one marshmallow because everybody else is going to be a Ghostbuster. I think my wife's going to be the slime guy, the green slime guy.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, cool. I'll be Marshmallow. Nope. So I'm just regular old. And I didn't have enough time. I kind of postponed it or procrastinated on too long because I wanted to like really be kitted out, like go all out, like actual pack. Yeah. And I don't even have like the thing. It's just the costume. So I will not be hardcore this year, but I'm excited. It'll be fun.
I had a friend whose son is a very interesting little boy. He is obsessed with like tools and like vacuums and screwdrivers and stuff. And he got all dressed up one time and he looked like a Ghostbuster, and everybody all Halloween was like, man, great Ghostbusters costume. And he was just like a carpet cleaner, and he just had like a carpet cleaner, like vacuum, and they thought he was a Ghostbuster.
Dude, that's funny. Has he watched the Brave Little Toaster?
I think he has. And he did recently actually watch the newer Ghostbusters. So that's been top of mind now as well.
Nice. My wife never heard of the Brave Little Toaster. I was like, you're not living.
That's a shame.
Unless you've seen that. Are you serious? So good. See, Amazon now includes advertising cost per SKU and the profit per unit in total sales breakdown. When you click on the SKU in Seller Central for a specific period, does Maven calculate profitability similar for advertised ASINs? Good to hear that they're doing that. That's actually awesome. Maven doesn't do that. We don't hook up to Amazon's advertising API. That's a whole different API cluster. We are approved for it, which is nice. So that could change, but not currently.
Yeah. What you want to do there is if you want Maven or any of your other strategies to factor in those additional advertising costs, you'll just want to bake them into the current cost field in Aura. That'll help at least have it be factored in when calculating min and max prices there. That'll be the case for really any costs you take on to sell SKUs. We do automatically take into account the referral and fulfillment fee for you, but shipping costs, prep costs, storage costs, really anything else that's going to be involved in selling an item, you want to bake that into the cost field, just so that can be taken into account, making sure your mins and maxes are in line with your expectations there.
Yeah. And we're trying to change a lot of that and add all these things. It's funny how like Amazon creates like these business units of APIs. So like you can be approved for like one API, but not for the others. You have to apply for all of them. It's like a whole mess. There's all kinds of different versions of the API, which is actually kind of fun when you dive deep into it. And you're like, cool, let's play around with this. Like, oh crap, we have to apply, like get accepted. Always kind of fun. I'm happy to announce too, a few weeks ago, we hired a new software engineer. So Jacob, who's actually sitting behind Casey right now. So growing the team, which is exciting. Doing a lot of fun stuff. So I think Q1, I think 2025 is going to be really fun for users. Yeah, really increasing our engineering capacity, all that good stuff. And Jacob so far has been a stud. So he jumped into an onboarding call yesterday and found a bug, just fixed it like in the call. And I don't think the person we were doing the call with thought he was being serious. I thought they were saying basically, "Oh, ha ha ha, that's funny." He's like, "No, I just fixed it. It's done." So pretty cool. See, they also now include the inbound shipping fees you have paid when you have used a partner carrier. Oh, that's cool. So they're starting to factor in a lot more stuff. See, this is kind of what I've been saying is Amazon is, at least from the developer side, pouring more resources into that ecosystem. Having been to Dev Summit at the HQ there in Seattle, they do care very deeply about this, and they're trying to innovate, add new things, wanting to have conversations to say, how can we do better? What data can we provide? So there's a lot more going into it than the average seller realizes, because a lot of that's just, for the developers right now. But that enables us to solve larger problems for sellers. I mean, there's things that we just can't do that seem simple, and it would be simple. We just don't have the data access to do it. Like I can see it in your Seller Central account, but I don't have access to it via the API. It seems like a lot of that stuff is starting to change, which is, I think, a really good sign. In earlier years, that was really not true. It was just kind of like, do whatever you want within reason. Here's our TOS, and that's kind of it. Now we have true developer reps, all these different things. So it's cool. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you have access to data, being able to slice it up and make decisions. But first step is getting access to that data.
Yeah. I mean, this is the big problem, right? You have an ocean of data for your accounts, and it's either locked behind an API, or you can access it, but you can't make it actionable, which is its own problem. Dumping you a raw data set doesn't really make it easier to analyze, because now you need to know what type of things to do it on, how to format it correctly, what questions to ask, all these different things. And so even if we just said everything's available, raw data, which technically you could do if you just sign up as a developer, you just export all your stuff. You can't really get insights from raw data. There's actually a lot that has to go into standardizing it, organizing it, formatting, all these different things, and then being able to structure it. I mean, listen, I'm pretty good at Excel, but there's some things where I'm just I got to Google that one, man. But if it was in a more usable, friendly format, maybe that would be very different. So we're hoping that Amazon will start to collect even more data and make that data also available. Because the more data, I mean, this is fuel, right? I keep saying good data is fuel for good AI. And although I'm a big proponent for AI and all these different things, it's kind of like having a hyper intelligent person on your team. If there's nothing for them to do, it's wasted potential. But if they had access to all the things, knew what to do, all these different things, it's now usable intelligence. And I think the more you can start to think through that lens, I think the better you're setting yourself up for the near future of what's to come. Yeah. But it's also, kind of on the platform to give you and collect that data.
Yeah,
so absolutely. You do have limitations. You see, I think this helps us, the sellers, figure out more accurate cost of goods and to use in Aura. Yeah, totally agree there. Totally agree. And when you're looking at your profit or your your ROI, all those different things in Aura, keep in mind that's gross, right? Even with FBA inbound shipping, we don't really view that as being factored into the sale. So that really shouldn't affect your gross margin. That should affect your net margin. It's more of an operational cost. Although some people don't view it that way. That's just kind of how we think. But yeah, being able to kind of transition from that's your gross, net, or that's your gross profit to that's your true net profit. That's a good place to get to. So that is something we're thinking about. Because again, more data, better decisions. I'm curious to see how this. I've been getting a lot more ads for Walmart's Black Friday stuff, and they're like, "Oh, if you're a member, you get early access, and it's 50% off the first year." So Walmart's pushing for subscribers on basically their version of Amazon Prime. And I do think that this Q4 is going to be a very interesting data set for sellers.
Definitely.
What is actually possible here. Because we kind of just know how Amazon's going to go.
Right.
Walmart's still more, and there are sellers that have been selling on Walmart for years. Don't get me wrong, but it just seems like this year is when there's been a big migration, a lot of people jumping in on it, and I think we'll have a larger data set to be able to know what's that impact there.
Definitely.
Because this is something we talk a lot about. It's like when you go multi-channel, the way you make decisions has to fundamentally change, because now there's an opportunity cost, assuming you have limited capital, of where do you send the inventory you're purchasing. If you have unlimited capital, it's whatever. You just maximize the demand. But if you can only order 100 units of a product, you now have to decide what percentage goes to Walmart and what percentage goes to Amazon.
Right.
And that's actually a very difficult decision if you don't have the data to understand how to maximize that opportunity. So it's going to be kind of fun.
Yeah. And in general, I've been getting a lot more. It's funny. I've been getting a lot more like advertisements for Walmart in podcasts I listen to, where they're like sponsoring different podcasts I listen to. I listen to The Big Picture, which is a big nerdy movie podcast. But yeah, I've generally heard that sales velocity is lower on Walmart, but general profit margin tends to be higher. It'd be interesting to see if that continues to be the case through Black Friday, or if that kind of flips on its head with it being such a high demand time of year. But yeah, you can feel free to tag Joel's comment on the screen there. I was actually pulling up the help article here. So Joel, I just posted the help article there for creating our recommended settings for a liquidation strategy. By default, you can't set a negative ROI for for auto-calculated mins and maxes in Aura. So if you want to sell at a negative ROI, you'll have to set that min price manually. But if you follow those settings there, that's our recommendation for liquidating items. And if those items don't sell at the pace that you're looking for, you'll want to just start to increase the margin that you're pricing below the competition by. I believe in that article, it says start with 2 cents. You could start with 5 or 10 cents and then kind of go up, or rather price below by an additional 5 cents every couple of days if you're really trying to increase that sales velocity there. That's my general recommendation.
Yeah. See, 80-20 Amazon Walmart. That's not a bad starting place, actually. I want us to get to a point where we have enough data at the individual seller level to make those recommendations, like per SKU, to be like, all right, cool. You're reordering this SKU. How many units can you afford? Okay, 200. Awesome. Send, whatever, 40% there, 60% here. Like that's going to shift. And that's what's so interesting is like, I like this as a starting point because it's general, it's simple, it gets you moving. But where we really want to get to is fine-grained recommendations at the SKU level, because it's going to change, right? I mean, we see how demand shifts rapidly, even just on Amazon. Now factor in how it can shift rapidly on Amazon and Walmart at the same time. So this week, it might be 80-20 Amazon, Walmart. 3 weeks from now, that could be completely inverse, right? It really depends. And that's where I think we're going to have to lean on software to be able to do that kind of stuff. But the upside is we can do that. We could definitely do that. That's a solvable problem with enough data. And now these types of things, you don't even have to solve yourself. Like the data is basically just telling you, hey, do this, like problem solved.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see, as the different tools you're using for sourcing and shipping, to be able to implement that themselves. Something like Scan Power, Inventory Lab, whenever you're creating it, to say, hey, you got 200 units. Here's what we recommend. And you say, do it. And it goes, great. I'm going to, let's keep going with Amazon, but I'm going to create a new Walmart shipment over here and we'll complete that later. Basically have these branches that you could just be like, yeah, that's right. I want to send 20 units over there, 40% over there. But let's keep going with Amazon. And then cool, I've basically got a shipment ready to go for Walmart. That would be nice. Like in real time, because I think it's kind of hard to, in a lot of ways, unless you're doing wholesale where you seemingly have unlimited access to supply. If you're doing RA, OA, where you do have limitations on how much you can buy, you're not looking at what am I able to send, right? So it's not like, well, if I could do 500 units on Amazon and then 1,000 on Walmart as an example, I'll just go order that much. You can't really do that with those models. You're really saying, I can buy 20. Okay, cool. So you don't really need to do that at the buying level unless you're doing wholesale or private label. It's really just splitting it out because the limitation is the supply. And then it's just optimizing on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So there is kind of two routes there, right? Two solutions, which is optimizing it during the shipment creation process. If you're doing an arbitrage model, if you're doing a wholesale model or private label, that's when you want it to be predictive and say, okay, well, how much should I order? And then just go order that amount, assuming you have the capital for it. I mean, these are going to be interesting problems, right? Like these don't seem like a big deal, but these little optimizations, I mean, compounded over a year, massive. Mm-hmm. But it's really difficult to do manually at this point. One, again, you don't have access to the data. And two, even if you did, it would take so long. And because arbitrage models are so high volume in terms of SKUs, it's a hard sell. I mean, even hiring a VA to solely do that may not be worth it. Could, depending on what volume you're at, it may. Mm-hmm. That's where we're going to need software to solve that problem. Like it's got to be really cheap and really fast and ideally automated, like you're not doing any work. It's just saying, here's the recommendation. You can do it or don't, up to you. You can override it, but like, here's kind of what we think you should do. Yep. That gets kind of fun.
Definitely.
Now imagine throwing in TikTok Shop as a third channel, right? You see how it becomes exponentially more difficult as you add new sales channels. And I think my assumption is that the future of being a seller is multi-channel. Like you're not going to be an Amazon seller. You're probably just going to be a third-party seller as the identification of what you do. And you happen to sell on Amazon, Walmart, and maybe something else.
Right.
And that's going to be the default. It's going to be less of, well, I mainly sell on Amazon. It's like, maybe you might do 80% of your revenue on Amazon, but you no longer consider yourself an Amazon seller.
Right.
I think that change will start to occur in the next probably 2-ish years is my peg. So
that makes sense. As we know, Amazon's been pretty heavy-handed with their deactivations in Q4 following various lawsuits over the summer. So as they potentially add more policies, safety nets, things to cover their own end, maybe people start to look elsewhere. Obviously, people have already started to jump over to Walmart. I personally wouldn't be surprised if Target follows suit in some shape or form. In my head, I kind of group Target and Walmart together. That's just the two stores that always did the same thing when I was
Target is bougie Walmart. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, it's Walmart with like the Etsy stuff for my girlfriend was just like, oh, we could spend $30 on this. I'm like, what's it gonna do?
Great.
It's just beige and sits there or whatever it is. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see kind of other channels pop up and how quickly they grab a portion of the market, if you will.
Let's see, adding a dollar amount to the cost that was imported would be ideal. That way you can take that dollar amount into consideration with ROI, et cetera. Yes, totally agree there. See, could you please share the advantages of using Perplexity on Amazon and explain how it can be beneficial? Target has started. It is invitation only at this point. Yeah, so I think Target's going to be following suit to Walmart pretty fast. Okay, so how to use Perplexity. I have experimented with this quite a bit. There were some interesting things that kind of work, but don't get you 100% there. I think Perplexity, it's less about you being an Amazon seller and you being a business owner. Perplexity is really good to go from I have a question to I need an answer relatively fast. A lot of what you're doing as a business owner is solving problems. That's all you do. And you're primarily solving problems you've never seen before, and you have no idea what you're doing. And so if you can compress the amount of time it takes you to go from I have a question or a problem to solution, the faster you will grow. And so Perplexity kind of helps with that, right? So if I'm wanting to dive deep into a new subject, right? Inventory management. What's the best practices there? What are the best books? Who should I read? Blah, 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 right? Those kind of questions are fantastic for Perplexity. It allows you to solve that really fast. So like if I did this recently, I got interested in nuclear energy because that's becoming more and more of a topic. So I literally just said, what are the top 3 recommended books for a layman person, for a newbie, to understand basically where what nuclear energy is, a little bit of the history, and the different variations of it, because I knew that there were some variations. And it served up 3 books. I bought one of the books, and it was fantastic. And again, that took me like 5 seconds, right? So it allows you to basically learn faster. I think we did it live one time. It might have been, it was either office hours or a live call I was doing. We were just like, let's just see what it can do here. And we gave it a product URL from a site and said, go find this on Amazon and return it. And it returned the product, which was kind of cool. Now you're not getting you can get some pricing stuff, but you're not getting fees or anything like that. It's not hooked up to the APIs. But an interesting thing that you can do, you can create something called Spaces. This is brand new, and you can add documentation, which means you can add your data. So what happens when you do a big export from Inventory Lab, Aura, whatever, add it to there, and now you can chat with your data. Now I can't do anything with it, but you can have conversations with it. You can ask, hey, when's the last time I ordered this product? Or how do I tend to do with this category? Assuming that's in the data, you now get some version of an answer. Might not be perfect, but get you 80% of the way there. Yeah. So that's something I'm experimenting with now, is basically taking all the internal information, that knowledge, uploading it there, and just being able to have a conversation. That's pretty cool. See, Luane. Hey, gents. Thanks as always. A question about how does Aura and Maven handle FBA inventory that is the same product, but it's been in storage at the FCs for different time amounts, e.g. 15 days versus 60 days of the same ASIN. So basically, if I'm reading this correctly, if it's an FC transfer, we won't touch it because that's not technically active in stock. So we will only reprice things that are technically active and available for sale. Now we will take you to your max price, assuming nothing's available. So if you have it in different timelines, that's fine. We just look at the status. So as long as there's at least one available status, one unit in available status, then we will reprice. Outside of that, Maven will basically default to essentially like either the dynamic max price or the optimal price. I think it goes to the dynamic max though.
Yeah. And also, Luane, if you're just referring to general like sales velocity over time with those units being fulfillable, with Maven focused on the optimal price, you may have to shift strategies. Typically, we recommend starting with Maven, then the buy box strategy to be a little bit more specific, and then a liquidation strategy if you're just trying to offload inventory. I did just now post, Finn just recently created this article around those 3 strategies and when to use them since they do have varying levels of aggressiveness. So essentially starting with Maven, then the buy box, then liquidation as inventory ages and sales velocity becomes more of a priority there.
Yeah. See, Joel, if I set my min ROI for Maven at 20%, is it going to mostly target higher, even at the expense of getting sales? Basically, I'm looking at it like 20% is a win for me, but Maven is treating it like that's the worst case scenario and staying away from it. Hopefully that makes sense. Totally makes sense. Your minimum is the worst case scenario. So you are correct there. Maven, again, keep in mind, Maven's not designed to target the buy box, which would increase velocity. We're trying to find that balance between sales velocity and profitability. And that's going to shift, right? We call that the optimal price. The optimal price changes all the time. So if you want to prioritize velocity over profitability, that's when I would go rule based, like Casey was just saying, in that article we just posted in the comment section, that would be like level 2. The thing about, 20% as your min is, if that's like your target, I wouldn't view it that way. That's the minimum amount you're willing to accept in ROI. So it's less about min being the target and more, that's the range I'm allowing Maven to work inside of that I'm okay with. That's as low as I'm willing to allow Maven to go, basically, is how I would view that. So if 20% is a win for you, I would actually consider lowering your min ROI to like 10%.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's going to take you down to 20% or 10%, but it does give Maven far more flexibility to do so if that's where the market is going.
Yeah, by increasing that range, Joel, it'll essentially give Maven more data to analyze and figure out what the best price is. So dropping that min price, like Dylan said, won't necessarily bring you down to that min, but especially if 20% is still a win in your book, I would recommend dropping it just a little bit lower, knowing that Maven's not just going to tank down to that price. It'll still focus on getting sales above your min.
Yeah. See, now that you mention it, there is a new AI-based app. I'm not mentioning the name that you can ask questions about your Amazon data. All that is available through API and have a conversation with it. Well, send me email me. I want to know what it is. Dylan, DILLON at goaura.com. Email me. I want to know what it is. I think I know what you're talking about, but maybe not. I'm going to laugh if I have it correct too, because I think I know exactly what you're talking about. And if it's what I think it is, it's actually very limited in what it can do. It's still an interesting concept, but I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah.
That's the frustrating part with a lot of the AI stuff. Like, a lot of things are possible right now, but it's like we're 95% of the way there, but that last 5% is so difficult, but that last 5% is what makes it truly magical to use, and you want to use it. That's really hard to do. And I think it's less of the models and more just the implementation of the models. When you get into building applications with large language models, like ChatGPT and all that, or GPT-4 and Claude and all that stuff, there's a lot of decisions. It's basically like architecting a SaaS company, like we are. Like you really have to think through how are things being done in a way that increases the effectiveness of it without trading costs for that. Because I mean, every time you hit up an LLM, that costs money via the API, and like it gets cheaper over time, but the newer models are the best reasoners and they're the most expensive. So most of the time those applications are built on GPT-4 because it's cheap and it's still a big leg up against 3.5, but I've yet to see somebody build or switch over to like O1 Preview, O1 Mini. Claude 3.5 is a little less used, but still used in some cases. It's more expensive. So if you're paying $20 for something like that, and they're using those models, they're not going to be around as a company in a year or so, because they're definitely losing money. That's the hard part, man. You got to find a price point that you could charge and be profitable so you can continue to exist while providing the best access and all these different things. It's crazy. So we've got a handful of minutes here, about 8 minutes left. So any last minute questions, we're more than happy to dive deep into. Appreciate everybody making the time, though. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you are dressing up for Halloween, if you have kids, or if you're just dressing up because you want to dress up, let us know in the comments. No judgment. I wanted to be Picard from Star Trek, and my kid said, no, you're going to be a Ghostbuster. I said, okay. See, I want to see all we talk about in one app called Aura. Thanks, guys. We're working on it. It's going to take some time, but we're working on it. I will say that there's a lot happening in the background that I can't talk about still, but we're getting there. Definitely getting there. I will say we do not consider ourselves a repricing company. I will say that. You'll notice I always say we're a tech company, not a repricing software company. They're very different things. So gives you a little bit of insights to how we think. Cool. We'll give it a few more minutes here for last minute questions. And if nothing else, we'll give you back some more of your time, get back to sourcing.
Yeah.
I have this idea for, I'm calling it Sourcing Camp. Actually, no, that is what I was calling it. But Nathan Jackson actually has Sourcing Camp, so I can't use that. But what I want to do is rent a house, get a bunch of OA sellers there, and then just force everybody to source for like 12 hours a day nonstop.
Yeah.
And just see what's possible. But like
just like a hackathon, but for sourcing. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to be like, all right, we're going to source for an hour, take a 15-minute break, do it again, rinse and repeat, and just see what we can do. I think that'd be kind of cool.
I did just post Dylan's email down there. If you want to email me, feel free to email me. It's just Casey at GoAura, but I will say I tend to be in our chat inbox a little bit more frequently than my email. So if you're looking for a quick response, always hit that chat feature up.
Yeah, 1000%. Awesome. So if there's no additional questions, we'll go ahead and end it there just for time. Appreciate everybody coming. We do this every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST, unless we otherwise say we're not. Appreciate everybody making the time to join us, asking some great questions. And with that, we'll let you get back to it.
Yeah, have a good week, folks. See you next week.
Bye, guys.